At the time, I'm just thinking I'm giving my daughter the help that she needs. And like I was saying, when I look back now based on affidavits, I realized I had pretty much handed my daughter over to the trans agenda. At the end of the assessment, and my daughter's sitting there in the room, and he goes, well, your daughter is a prime candidate for cross-sex hormones. She meets all the criteria. And I'm just looking at him like, are you out of your mind? And he's explaining away like these crushes on teachers by saying, well, yeah, she's a boy, but she's a gay boy. Like, it's just the absolute lunacy that was coming out. And I'm just thinking, this is insane. You're actually with a straight face telling me this, like, against all common sense. At this point now, she's 14. And I don't go because I'm working, but my ex-wife and my daughter go downtown to BC Children's Hospital, and they do the assessment. Partway through the assessment, about 2 hours in, my ex-wife gives me a call and says, Rob, guess what's going on here? I said, what? Well, they're about to start injecting her with cross-sex hormones right now, testosterone. And I said, absolutely no way. And so they didn't do it. And then I get the consent form dropped off at my house later that evening. My ex-wife drops it off. And I'm reading through it, and the stuff on there, like, you wouldn't do that to an animal. It's listing all these risk factors, right? Like increased heart disease, different types of cancers. Sterilization was right there on the top of the list, which is the worst one of the bunch. Like just madness. But what these kids latch onto is the other parts, which is, your voice will be lower, you'll grow facial hair, right? They're not thinking about being sterilized and that they're not going to have a family later when they're 14. That's probably the last thing on their minds at that point in their life, right? For most kids that age. And then the form goes on to further say that all this stuff is experimental. We really do not know the outcomes and the other risk factors because it's so new. And it has a disclaimer in there that says you will not actually change from a girl to a boy or a boy to a girl. It's in the consent form because they recognize they cannot change DNA. So in the consent form, they even admit that, yeah, you're not really changing. We're just kind of giving you some features of the opposite sex. And that's really all it is, except that they're permanent features. It's not something where you can say, well, that was fun. I had a beard for a year. Now I want to go back to being a girl. Like my daughter will be shaving now for the rest of her life, whether she continues forward or desists.
My name is Angelina, Ireland, and I met the father about a year ago, December. And he was a friend of a friend, and this mutual friend of ours was telling me about his situation. And so I wanted to meet him, and I wanted to read this letter that I'd heard about that he received from BC Children's Hospital. So we got together and he showed me the letter, and at that point, because it was so draconian, I asked him, you want to fight this?
My name's Laura-Lynn Tyler Thompson, and I violated a publication ban, probably one would say deliberately, because it's of national public importance, and this story needs to get out.
My name is Jenn Smith. I'm a transgender identified political activist in British Columbia. I've been involved in protesting various transgender related policies and programs in schools particularly, and in particular in terms of how they affect our most vulnerable children in British Columbia. So I've been doing that for a long time. As a result of my activism, I basically became the first person to write about this story nationally in Canada with the Post-Millennial in 2018, in December of 2018, it was published there. And I met the father before there was any court case even, and before there was any court orders, and reported on this, and it became like sort of a central thing in my presentations to sort of illustrate the dangers of what is happening in our society today with transgender policies in terms of what they're doing with children and families.
What was your reaction initially when you first heard about this case, this story?
Well, I was very alarmed when I first heard about it back in 2018 because here is a father fighting for his child not to be transitioned. Here is a school not informing the father that she has been socially transitioning at school, including changing her name, and that was not disclosed to the parents. And now going to activist doctors and activist lawyers up to an activist judge. The whole way along, this has been one group of activists that can all be tied together in actual fact. A small group of activists in Canada now ruling this story.
At the beginning, we thought this will be easy, right? I mean, who would condone that a child at the age of 13 could make up their mind about life-altering medical procedures, decisions, medications. But as we found out, a child in this province is absolutely given the authority to make those kinds of decisions that will impact their entire lives, that will destroy their bodies. And parents can say nothing about it, can do nothing about it. So why? I think it's an ideological agenda to push parents completely out of the equation, to give the state control over our children, that they are the ones who make the choices, they make the decisions, and parents have no authority and no power.
The Vancouver Coastal Health was basically recommending that parental rights be trampled and that kids could be sex reassigned, in their words, without parental consent. So I was aware of this about 6 months before, and then what happened was when I first released the information that this was a danger, that it was going to start happening, the other side of this debate said I was a fearmonger and it wasn't a real threat and it wasn't going to happen. But I didn't have any evidence of that. Then 6 months later, I meet the father in this case, and it proves pretty much everything I said. I said, well, there you go. This is the nightmare scenario, trampling parental rights and forcibly transitioning kids against parental wishes.
In Canada, we don't have parental rights anymore. Any child in this nation, so this is the first one that we're litigating on, but a child who's 14 can decide that they can alter their gender and take cross-sex hormones and proceed to possibly gender-affirming surgery, and parents have no right to stop it. This is precedent-setting. It should be sounding alarms across the nation, what they're teaching in schools. Jenn Smith showed today that with this young woman's own testimony, she showed that it was at school that she saw a video that gave her this idea. She then cut her hair and has gone along for this ride. Put forward by the activist lawyers, the activist doctors, and the activist judges.
They're promoting it through SOGI 123. They're promoting it in terms of, allowing an environment where they're telling small children that, you can be a boy or you can be a girl. It doesn't matter what you were born as. I mean, these kinds of ideas are quite damaging to a small child. And the most insidious thing is that parents are not allowed to have any choice in this kind of education. Now, some parents may be happy with it, right? And they may think that's perfectly fine. It's very progressive and we're all woke and that's great. And other parents would say, no, just hold on a minute now, right? I don't think I want to participate in that. Not yet, not when my child is in kindergarten or elementary school. But unfortunately, those parents are not allowed to dissent, right? They're not allowed to sign the permission form to say, no, I won't be participating. And that's a problem. Right? Yeah. Because we parents are actually paying for this, right? We're the taxpayers. We should be the ultimate person that's advised as to whether or not you want to participate. And that's not happening.
Parents at this stage of the game, too, need to be educated on the matter because they don't even know that this is a part of the curriculum half the time. So for anybody who's just hearing of this SOGI term for the first time, what is SOGI? What does that stand for, SOGI 123?
SOGI is Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity 123. It's part of the curriculum in the BC public school system from kindergarten right through to grade 12. And I think it's very controversial. We have seen many people having serious issue with it. And again, I say that, if there's parents out there that like it, they think it's positive, and they, that's their right. They can expose their children to this kind of ideology. But for those parents that do not, they should have a right, as a Canadian citizen, as a taxpayer, to say, my children will not be participating in this program. Thank you, but no thank you. And that's what we're not seeing.
It's absolutely hideous. Former president of the BCTF, Glenn Hansman, informed me when I was complaining about 5 books I'd found. He informed me on Twitter, Laura-Lynn, what are you talking about? There's dozens and dozens and dozens of transgender books in our schools, and they are transgender indoctrination books. We are seeing a classic case of a young person being affected by something that they heard in school, a video they saw in school, by books they've seen in school, and therefore a seed is implanted. And when you have vulnerable youth who are going through, teenage years are rough on all of us, plus you add maybe some trauma, and now you got a real problem. So you have a youth vulnerable to an idea that would make her feel better. Well, it takes years to find out that wasn't the answer, and that's the problem. Yes, schools are culpable in this.
Well, you then took it upon yourself to raise awareness about this particular issue, and that has now landed you here today. Can you talk a little bit about this publication ban and how you got kind of tied in with that?
Well, the publication ban, I was kind of vaguely familiar with it, but I'm so busy in my activism and stuff that I'd never actually read the text of it. So when the father in this case decided he was going to breach the publication ban and started doing interviews with people, I immediately said, okay, well, he's doing interviews, he should do an interview with me, because I regard myself as sort of the primary activist in BC trying to protect kids, especially vulnerable kids and foster kids and stuff. So I volunteered to do an interview with him as well, which technically was a breach of the publication ban. The other side of this debate sort of scrambled at that point and served me with papers. I must have got served by half dozen or more lawyers that I was violating this publication ban. So I got dragged in here today to, well, actually, this is the 3rd time I've been in court, and it's going to be the 4th time tomorrow to deal with this issue. And my argument is that this is an issue that shouldn't be hidden behind a cloak of secrecy. This should be out there. People should know the names of the doctors involved. It should be discussed openly as a matter of enormous public interest. So we're debating whether or not these publication bans should stay in place.
Now, you have since taken it upon yourself to raise awareness about this issue. You released a video, and that subsequently landed you here at the courts. As I understand it, you had some police officers show up at your home. Can you tell us about what happened there?
It really is unbelievable. So the judge had stated that I needed to take down the videos from my social platforms. And so I didn't do it fast enough for lesbian lawyer Barbara Finley. She calls herself that. She actually adds in ugly, cisgender, fat lesbian lawyer, but I don't want to put any of that on her. I just want to say she's a lesbian activist lawyer, and I didn't get those videos down fast enough for Barbara Finley, and so she called the police, and she had the police make a visit to my home. I mean, it's real interesting. If your car gets busted up, even if you have a family dispute in Canada, sometimes the police won't show up, you know, on time, and you can't get their help. But apparently, if you are violating this order and you are disseminating information that's valuable to the public, those police, they will be at your door. And so I wasn't at home. I did meet them at the police station, and to me, a gross injustice after that was carried out.
What happened after that?
Well, the police officers shockingly gave me the name of the young lady in question who is transitioning. I had never known the name. The father had been very protective of that. There was no need to know her name. There was no need to discuss that. But Barbara Finley, who is supposed to be protecting this young person as her counsel, is the one who gave the names to the RCMP, who divulged it to me, and I was shocked about that. And so I went home and I blogged about it, and Barbara Finley subsequently lied in an affidavit stating that I looked delighted that I had her name. And I did not look delighted, and I proved that to the judge, and I tried today to get her taken off this case, because she is an activist that, this young girl is a pawn in the hands of numerous activists in this country, and we're fed up with it. And so I wasn't given leeway to, the judge did not entertain my application on that. I did, however, state that I'm grossly offended that a lawyer of the court lied in an affidavit and misrepresented facts in order to discredit me. And that does not give me trust in our judicial system.
The father had decided to do some interviews, because he felt that this information was far too important, that he needed to talk about his story. Now, we recognize that he's not allowed to do that. That's his choice. But now he's being hauled up in front of the judge to quite possibly face sanction for that behavior, for telling his story of how he's been gagged and how his parental rights have been destroyed, and what's they've done to his kid against his will. And so now it's very serious, because the Attorney General of British Columbia has inserted themselves into the middle of this case. They weren't part of this case. This is quite unprecedented, that the Attorney General would step in and say that they want a much heavier sanction against this person, against this father. The Attorney General of British Columbia has inserted themselves within this case to push for criminal contempt against the father. And this is a far more weighty charge than just civil contempt. Civil contempt, you would perhaps get fined, that kind of a sanction, right? Now, criminal contempt means that he could face jail time. That's what makes this so serious. So they are saying that what he's doing is against the public interest, whereas many would consider what he's doing is in fact beneficial to the public interest, because people, and particularly parents, need to know what the schools are doing against their knowledge, against their will. But the Attorney General now has decided to step in, and so now we're actually quite concerned for the father. He could be facing a criminal contempt charge. Right from the beginning, Justice Bowden, he put that gag order on the father so that we cannot speak his name. We cannot speak about any of the doctors that are involved. We are absolutely silenced, because I think that perhaps they were concerned that if people actually knew what was going on, it was not going to be tolerated. So for all of these months now, about almost a year, he has been gagged and he's not allowed to speak, which means that none of us can tell people what's happening.
I think they have to hide that this is really a dark part of our history in Canada, that they are sterilizing and mutilating teenagers. And they are doing it, and it is becoming a public outrage, so of course everybody is upset about it. Well, the doctors are getting threats, and and I do not condone that. It is not helpful to our case. Anybody sending threats to the doctors, it's not helpful. But it does show the outrage that people feel, that they feel something grossly inappropriate is going on in Canada, and we cannot be silent. They don't want it getting out because this is a global agenda. First of all, you got to follow the money. Jenn Smith today in his presentation was showing the links to pharmaceuticals, showing the links to all of the, the inappropriate ties between doctors, the pharmacy, the lawyers, the judges, all of them LGBTQ activists. And the LGBTQ community is actually very divided on this. I have got some wonderful letters lately from LGBTQ saying thanks for standing up for kids, because we don't think they should be transitioned.
Who do you think needs to ultimately be held accountable here? Because, as I understand it with this particular case, a lot of this came from the schools. It went from the teachers to the counselors, from the counselors to the doctors, from the doctors to pushing the idea directly onto the child. Is it the doctor ultimately who should be held responsible, or who do you think should be held?
Well, this is what I tried to illustrate in the court today, because initially, the last time I was in court, the judge said that, well, you can talk about the doctors, you just can't connect it to this case. But this is our star case. Like, this is the most important case of its kind in the world, in my opinion, right? And it's like a centerpiece of my argument, and it allows you to connect the dots, because you see how the child basically was influenced by SOGI materials in the schools, and then how this doctor who came in and recommended the medical transitioning was involved in setting up the policies and also writing materials for the schools. So it's very important to connect all these dots and show that what we have going on is, like, if you're looking for one party to blame, you're looking in the wrong direction. This is like what I call a perfect storm of conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
It has got to be malpractice, in my humble opinion, that a doctor would, after 1 2-hour examination of a patient, would offer them a lifelong gender-altering course for the rest of their lives. I do believe it's malpractice. I believe the suits are coming. And in fact, you know, the very first young woman is now suing Tavistock, a gender clinic in the UK, and with well and good regard, because this is going to continue to happen. There's going to be more and more of these cases, and I hope that they have got good insurance for malpractice, because it's coming.
So what sort of things would you like to see come of this? You know, I mean, it's tough to say where this is going to go in the future, but what sort of things would you like to see come of this?
Well, I will tell you that this case has legs of its own. This is something that has a mystical, spiritual, unbelievable trajectory that I'm not in charge of. However, what I'd like to see is that they stop trying to hide information that all parents need to know. For one thing, if you have a child who's struggling with gender dysphoria, take them to a doctor who's not an activist. Take them to a psychologist that is not an activist, who has only one agenda: to use your child as a pawn to show that there's more and more and more transgendering going on, and to, in fact, you know, validate this evil and dark practice.
What I really wanted to show was that, again, the systemic nature of this, and the fact that the policymakers, the people who are making the policies on how to treat these kids, the educational materials that they're providing in schools to sort of, in my opinion, brainwash the kids, the doctors who are benefiting from this financially. I can't even say the doctor's name yet, but and the connections between some of the bigger organizations, like the fact I pointed out that Eby, the largest manufacturer of synthetic hormones and puberty blockers in the world, has a partnership with UBC, which is where a lot of the SOGI materials come out, right? So I want to show that this is a systemic thing, and that there are a lot of vested interests who are benefiting from this, and we need to connect all of these dots, and that was my argument to the judge. I think what I would like to see is basically what I'm asking for right now is I'm asking for provincial and national inquiries, okay? Because I don't think that the answer is actually here in the courts, okay? All I'm asking for the courts is that I, as a political activist, be allowed to continue to speak and to point out the problems with medically transitioning kids, specifically vulnerable kids. So I want to be able to continue to speak about this issue and raise awareness, and hopefully by raising that awareness, we will get enough pressure to force these inquiries where we can actually start opening some of the books of these doctors and find out what's really going on. And hopefully, my ideal would be to stop all medical transitioning of youths under the age of 18.
We have myself and the father and another friend of ours, Jenn Smith, who's had a lot of experience in this debate. We have pooled our resources, and we've come together and we've said, there's a great need in this country. There's a great need for education. People also need a lobbying body for them to stand for parental rights, that we need to stand for also for kids who don't have parents, right? Because there's a large number of children in the foster care system which are being exposed to ideology, and they have no one to protect them at all. So we see that there's a need for education. There's a need for advocacy. There's also a need for people who want to detransition and don't have any information, don't know where to go. So we've come together, and in order to fulfill that need, we've started a foundation, and it's called the Canis Foundation. And after, it will be launching in the very near future, but it's basically going to be more of a research area for people to come and get information. Parental rights is very important for me. That's going to be something that I'm going to be pushing forward and speaking to legislators about. And Jenn Smith, as an ex-foster child himself, has a real passion to protect foster children. He's looking for a national inquiry as to why there have been so many foster kids being transitioned. And these are all really important questions as a nation going forward, right? So, these are the kinds of questions that we want to pursue. And I think that there's a need. there's a need for that, and we want to fill that need.
Every parent in Canada, you need to go to your school, to your principal, you need to ask about the SOGI resources. When it's SOGI Day or they say that they're, doing some teaching, pull your kids out of school. In fact, if I were a parent with young children, which mine are grown, thank God, I would not have my children in a public school. It is an absolutely dangerous place for kids to be. And what you need to do is you need to know what your kids are learning and have those talks at the dinner table. At the dinner table, you want to be able to ask your kids, what did you learn today? And when they say, oh, nothing, don't listen to that. Say, so what do you think about boys and girls? Are boys and girls completely different and separate? I bet you'll find your kid will go, no, you can be a boy or girl in your head. And you'll, as a parent, you'll go, what? And right under your nose, you'll realize that lies, deception, and an abomination of a curriculum has been put in front of the kids, and it is affecting a nation. It's wrong. And so you need to be very, very invested in what your kids are learning.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.